Abandoned while pregnant, humiliated, and with nowhere to turn, a young woman found her last hope behind the iron gates of a gloomy mansion. What seemed like nothing more than a desperate job quickly brought her face to face with a paralyzed millionaire, locked away in his own pain. Two broken lives, drawn together by chance, about to challenge conventions, secrets, and old scars. A forbidden romance, a journey of healing, and the power of second chances where hope is born in the most unlikely place. The road stretched endlessly ahead, lined with twisted trees clawing at the gray sky. Emily clutched her worn-out backpack against her chest, the broken zipper and frayed fabric revealing every fall she had endured in life. Her still small belly betrayed the presence of a child who couldn't wait. The taxi pulled away, leaving her alone before the iron gates that creaked open with a slow, haunting sound. The echo lingered like a silent warning that this night would change everything. The mansion rose before her, cold, imposing, and suffocating, like a shadow swallowing hope. Its damp stone walls reflected the pale moonlight, painting a scene of mystery and silence. Emily took a deep breath, trying to calm the fear tightening her throat. Each step on the gravel sounded too loud, as if the place rejected her even before she crossed the threshold. She felt small, invisible, yet there was no turning back. Fate was pushing her straight into this maze of sorrow. The heavy door swung open, revealing the rigid figure of the housekeeper. Cold eyes, stern face, clipped words. "Follow me." No questions. Her voice cut through the thick air of the candlelit hallway like a sentence passed. Emily obeyed in silence, heart racing, feeling judged by every glance. The house itself seemed to breathe distance and chill, every painting on the wall a silent witness to its hidden secrets. The scent of polished wood blended with that of old books, and the faint trace of an extinguished fireplace. Emily felt out of place, like an intruder in a world that didn't want her there. Still, her hand instinctively rested on her belly, reminding her of the strength she had to find. The echo of her footsteps clashed with the suffocating silence. Something about the place felt larger than life, like an unseen presence watching her every move. The housekeeper stopped before a closed door, handing her the key without expression. Emily gripped it tightly, though her hands trembled, and pushed the door open slowly. The simple room with its heavy curtains and neatly made bed offered no comfort, only loneliness. She sat down, her exhausted body giving in, but her eyes stayed alert. She knew this roof hid secrets and that her arrival would not be welcome. The mansion breathed silence, yet between the shadows, it seemed to whisper that her story was only just beginning. Morning crept timidly through the tall windows, lighting up a vast hall where silence reigned. Emily walked cautiously, aware of the housekeeper's eyes on her. That was when she saw him for the first time. Alexander Reed, a young man still, but marked by deep sorrow. Sitting tall in his wheelchair, his rigid posture clashed with the dark gaze that seemed to pierce the soul of anyone daring to come too close. The air between them felt heavy, as if every breath had to be measured. Alexander offered no welcome, only harsh rules thrown like blades. Silence, distance, obedience. His low, steady voice echoed through the hall, soaked in bitterness. Emily swallowed hard, but kept her chin up. What moved her was not only fear, but the desperate need to survive. That first clash left the atmosphere tense, like an invisible rope stretched to the breaking point, binding them in the same space. He kept looking away, as though avoiding the very act of facing life. Yet, for a fleeting moment, his gaze fell on Emily's discreetly rounded belly. There was hardness there, yes, but also a shadow of unspoken curiosity. Emily, silent, gripped the fabric of her dress, feeling the sting of hidden judgment. The ticking of an old clock filled the silence with slow, suffocating beats, turning the moment into something almost unbearable. Emily refused to be just another shadow in that world of orders and silence. Her simple gestures, straightening a misplaced book, smoothing out a folded curtain, were quiet acts of defiance, subtle reminders that life and humanity still existed within those walls. Alexander watched, though he would never admit it, as if caught off guard by something he hadn't expected. A silent battle began to unfold between them, rigidity against gentleness, bitterness against persistence. Their first encounter ended without words of farewell, but with something neither of them could deny. A strange connection, uneasy and inevitable, was forming. Emily climbed the staircase, feeling the weight of every step, while Alexander, motionless in his chair, continued to watch her from afar. Neither of them knew it yet, but that initial clash was only the opening act of a story shaped by pain, longing, and redemption. The days that followed dragged on in an almost ritual silence. Emily carried out her tasks with care, arranging books, preparing trays, adjusting curtains. Alexander remained distant, observing from afar, as though each of her movements was an unwelcome intrusion into his rigid routine. The mansion felt even colder, mirroring the temperament of its master. Nothing but curt orders and icy glances filled the space between them. Yet cracks began to form in the silence. One morning, Emily noticed Alexander's eyes lingering a few seconds longer on her belly. No words were spoken, just a quiet sigh he tried to hide. It stirred something in her, a mix of unease and compassion, as though behind all his hardness lay something he was fighting to bury. Still, neither dared to break down the wall that stood between them. On a rainy afternoon, while collecting laundry, Emily stumbled upon a forgotten box. Inside were old photographs, faded letters, and remnants of a time when Alexander had once smiled. Faces blurred by time, yet revealing a man who seemed different, more human, more vulnerable. Her heart tightened as she realized the millionaire wasn't only made of steel, but also of wounds from a past still alive. She kept the discovery to herself, but it changed the way she saw him. That night, as she served dinner, their eyes met for a brief instant. Emily saw pain hiding behind the mask of arrogance. Alexander quickly looked away, as if afraid of being exposed. Outside, the sound of rain tapping against the windows seemed to echo the weight of everything left unsaid. Each day became a silent dance between hostility and fleeting signs of weakness. Emily, with subtle gestures, revealed her humanity. Alexander, with furtive glances, let slip the truth he tried to bury. The mansion, once nothing but stone and shadow, began to pulse with a different kind of tension, as if something long hidden was about to emerge from the darkness. Night fell heavy over the estate. Lightning tore across the sky, thunder rolling through the corridors like war drums. Emily awoke to a muffled sound from downstairs, a stifled groan, almost a strangled cry. She rushed down, her bare feet cold against the marble floor. There, she found Alexander hunched in his chair, body rigid, hands digging into his lifeless legs as if trying to rip the pain out of them. He gasped for air, sweat streaming down his forehead, his eyes shut tight in despair. "Get out," he muttered, his voice rough, trying to push her away. But Emily did not retreat. She knelt before him, clasping his hands firmly, ignoring the chill that seeped from his skin. Her eyes held no pity, only empathy. The storm outside seemed to mirror the storm raging inside him, as though the entire world bore witness to that moment. Alexander resisted, shoving her back with the harshness of a man terrified of being seen weak. But her persistence cracked through his wall. Emily held his gaze, as if wordlessly saying, "You are not alone." Slowly, he gave in, his shoulders trembling, his breath uneven. The silence grew heavy, but it was no longer hostile. For the first time, he allowed someone to touch the wound no one could see. Emily wiped the sweat from his brow with a handkerchief, her gentle gestures cutting through the brutality of his pain. With every touch, Alexander seemed to calm, as though her presence carried more strength than his suffering. There was something in this simple woman, pregnant, vulnerable, that disarmed him completely. He couldn't explain it, but he knew that something inside him shifted with that contact. When the storm outside began to fade, so did his. Alexander's breathing steadied, his eyes still damp but less shadowed. Emily remained kneeling, her hands locked with his in a silent pact. That moment marked the first true human connection between them, and though neither dared to admit it, something had been born that night out of pain, fragility, and the unexpected. The night settled into a heavy quiet as rain drummed against the stained glass windows. Restless, Emily sought refuge in the library, where the scent of old books and polished wood offered a strange comfort. The fire crackled low in the hearth, casting dancing shadows across the walls. She hadn't expected to find him there. Alexander sat still in his chair, staring at an open book as though it were a mirror of memories. The unexpected encounter thickened the air. Emily started to step back, but his eyes held her in place. "Why are you here?" His voice sounded sharp, but underneath, something else lingered. She took a steady breath and answered with quiet firmness, "Because this is the only place that doesn't judge me." Silence followed, and for a fleeting instant, Alexander's gaze softened, as if he saw in her a reflection of himself. The rain outside grew heavier, echoing the weight of that revelation. Emily walked slowly toward the shelf, her fingers brushing across the dusty spines. The soft echo of her footsteps filled the room, yet every movement seemed to stir something inside him. "You don't understand, Emily. I have nothing to give," he said, his voice trembling. She turned, moving closer without fear. "Maybe what I need isn't what you think." The tension rose like a hidden flame beneath ashes, ready to ignite. The words lingered in the air, but their eyes spoke for them. Emily leaned in, their breaths mingling, and the world seemed to vanish around them. The storm roared outside, but inside the library, there was only the heat of two broken hearts finding each other. The first touch was hesitant, almost a question. The second was a plunge with no return. The kiss came with the force of years of suppressed silence. Fierce, urgent, filled with pain and desire. Emily's hands cupped his face, and Alexander allowed himself to feel without barriers, without rules. That act crossed the line of the forbidden, but it was inevitable. The library became witness to a passion that could no longer be restrained, and they both knew nothing would ever be the same. The night wrapped them in a complicit silence, broken only by the faint sound of rain still falling. Emily and Alexander remained close, their eyes heavy with something new, something beyond mere necessity. Tension gave way to something more human, more intimate, as though they had finally found a safe harbor amid the chaos. It was more than desire, it was the surrender of two fractured souls. Emily rested her hand on his, and Alexander, in a rare gesture, did not pull away. "You don't have to be afraid of me," she whispered softly, her words almost a breath. He closed his eyes, as if her voice had the power to heal wounds unseen. The weight of the years seemed lighter in her presence. For the first time, he allowed someone to see him without a mask. That night, there was no distance. Touch became a silent confession, where every gesture revealed more than words ever could. Emily, her hand resting over her belly, showed that she accepted life as it was, without shame, without regret. Alexander watched her, moved by the strength of someone who, though vulnerable, radiated courage. A bond was growing between them, invisible yet rooted deep, strong as the earth itself. Between soft kisses and whispered words, old scars opened. He spoke of his losses, of dreams that vanished with the accident. She shared her lonely nights, her abandonment, and her fear of raising a child alone. Shared pain became a bond, and the emptiness within them began to be filled. The room, once heavy with shadows, now seemed warmed by a new flame. Alexander fell asleep with his face resting on Emily's lap, like a man who had finally found rest after years of torment. In silence, Emily stroked his hair, realizing that this night was not just a physical union, but the beginning of something far greater. For the first time in a long time, there was peace. And within that peace, a promise was born, a love strong enough to withstand even the deepest wounds. The morning broke under a gray sky, as though it already sensed the storm that was coming. Emily walked through the gardens of the mansion when she heard her name spoken in a tone that froze her blood. Turning, she found herself face to face with Daniel Carter. The man who had abandoned her, the father of the child she carried, stood there with the same cold stare that had scarred her in the past. Her heart pounded, and the fragile peace she had built in recent days began to unravel. Daniel smiled with arrogance, a smile that carried no affection, only threat. "I see you've found yourself a comfortable place to hide," he said, folding his arms. Instinctively, Emily stepped back, her hands moving protectively over her belly. The shock deepened when she discovered the reason for his presence. Daniel wasn't there by chance. He was a lawyer, and worse, he had direct ties to Alexander Reed. Fate, cruel as ever, had tangled their paths once more. That night, Alexander received him in the study. The silence between the two men weighed heavy like lead. From a distance, Emily caught fragments of their exchange. "So the child is his?" Alexander's voice rang firm, yet laced with restrained pain. Daniel confirmed with cutting irony, making it clear he had no intention of taking responsibility. The mansion's walls seemed to close in, suffocating every breath. Emily felt the ground tremble beneath her feet. For a moment, Alexander appeared crushed under the weight of revelation. His hard gaze locked on Emily, tears threatening in her eyes. But instead of pushing her away, he did something no one expected. "This child may be his, but the choice is mine, and I choose you." His words sliced through the air, heavy with emotion. Emily's throat tightened with a knot of disbelief and relief. It was the first time someone had chosen to stay, even in the face of the truth. Daniel laughed with scorn, but his presence could not extinguish the flame that had just been lit between them. Emily and Alexander, in silence, bound themselves to one another with an unspoken vow to face the past without fear. Daniel's shadow lingered like a threat ready to return, but in that moment, their love was strengthened. Shared pain became a pact of resistance. Sunlight filtered through the heavy curtains, casting a softer glow that seemed to transform the mansion itself. For the first time in a long time, Emily awoke without the weight of fear pressing on her chest. In the kitchen, she found Alexander already at the table, and the silence that once divided them had given way to a quiet rhythm filled with warmth. Breakfast was no longer just food, it was glances, faint smiles, and the fragile certainty that together they could breathe again. The hours took on a new rhythm. Alexander began to let her into more corners of his life. Emily read to him in the library, and at times the silence between them was more intimate than any word. He watched her every movement with careful attention, as if relearning how to live through her presence. The mansion, once only shadows, now felt lighter, touched by a breeze of hope. One day, he led her to a hidden gate in the garden. Beyond it, he revealed his mother's secret garden, a place forgotten by time, covered in wildflowers and stone benches. Emily was left speechless, her eyes brimming with tears. Alexander offered one of his rare smiles, silently confessing that he was letting her into a part of himself no one else had ever seen. That place became a symbol of the trust that was growing between them. That night, the mansion took on a different tone. A candlelit dinner was prepared, not extravagant, but filled with meaning. Alexander, still stiff in some gestures, let slip words that revealed his transformation. Emily, moved, answered with shy smiles and gentle touches. The flame of the candle reflected in their eyes, as if sealing a new chapter in the story they were building together. The routine of peace and affection did not erase the wounds of the past, but it proved that starting over was possible. Each gesture became a brick in a new life, each glance a silent vow that neither of them was alone anymore. Emily felt she was living something she had never believed possible, a romance with a millionaire not built on luxury, but on truth. And in simplicity, a hope was born that neither dared to put into words. Autumn draped the garden in golden leaves when Emily was summoned to the main hall. The room was transformed. Candles lit the vast space, and petals scattered across the floor led to Alexander. He waited in his wheelchair, impeccably dressed, his eyes shining with a mix of nervousness and hope. Emily stopped, stunned. "What is happening?" she whispered, her voice trembling. Alexander drew a deep breath before speaking. "I've spent too long chained to the past. Today, I want to build a future with you." The silence that followed was broken by the entrance of a small group. The housekeeper, a few servants, and an elderly priest. Emily covered her mouth with her hand, tears spilling before she even heard the words. It was a wedding, an unexpected gesture that left her breathless. He extended his hand, steady despite its tremor. "Emily, will you marry me? Not for convenience, not for appearances, but for love, for us, and for your child, who is now also mine." His words echoed through the hall, every syllable heavy with emotion. Emily sobbed, her eyes overflowing, and could only manage a trembling reply, "Yes." The hall, once a stage for silence and sorrow, filled with new life. Their vows were exchanged in whispers, yet carried a truth no luxury could ever offer. Emily promised never to abandon him, and Alexander promised to be more than a husband, to be home, to be shelter. Tears streamed down their faces, binding them in an emotion that overflowed. The ring shimmered in the candlelight, a symbol of a bond born in the unlikely, yet beating with strength. That night, they celebrated not only a marriage, but a victory over the ghosts that had haunted them. The bedroom was no longer a place of solitude, but of surrender, desire, and hope. In passionate kisses and tender embraces, they reaffirmed what they had promised before all. And in the stillness of the night, the flame of two broken hearts shone brighter than ever. The morning wind stirred the curtains when Daniel returned for the last time. Unlike before, he carried neither arrogance nor threat. A folder was in his hands, his eyes lowered, as if he had finally accepted the end of his fight. Emily met him in the hall of the mansion, her heart heavy yet steady. He opened the folder and handed her a document, the official renunciation of paternity. The signature was final, a single line that closed years of pain. Emily felt the weight of the past lift, though a quiet sadness lingered for what had never been. Alexander approached in his chair, his gaze intent. Daniel lifted his eyes only briefly, meeting his without bitterness, only resignation. "Take good care of him," he said, nodding toward Emily's belly. His voice came out hoarse, almost like an unspoken apology. Then he turned and walked away, disappearing beyond the iron gates. The silence that remained was no longer suffocating. Emily took a deep breath, realizing she could finally choose freely. She looked at Alexander, and his gaze returned more than promises, it returned certainty. "Now it's just us, and that's enough." His words sounded like music, carrying them into a new chapter. Pain had been transformed into strength. That night, they walked together to the secret garden, the same place where he had once opened his soul. The stars shone above them, and the cool air seemed to bless the new life they were about to build. Alexander held her hand firmly, as if he would never let go again. Emily rested her head on his shoulder, her eyes glistening with hope. There, in the stillness of the night, they vowed to raise the baby as a true family. There was no luxury, no perfection, only love, companionship, and redemption. What began as a forbidden romance, a marriage of convenience, and years of pain had turned into a story of resilience. Through tears and smiles, they understood that the future didn't need to be perfect to be happy, it only needed to be theirs. Two broken hearts, an unexpected child, and an improbable love. This is the story of Emily and Alexander, a journey of healing, choices, pain, and rebirth. But now I want to know, what did you think of this story? Leave your comment below and subscribe to the channel to follow more emotional love stories that will touch your heart.